Was A Quiet Place inspired by Signs, It Comes at Night, and War for the Planet of the Apes? Was Ready Player One influenced by Avatar, Wreck-It Ralph, and The Last Starfighter? Is The Hurricane Heist more influenced by Sharknado or Geostorm? These are the kinds of questions my guest co-hosts and I discuss on my podcast, Piecing It Together. Every week we look at a new movie and try to figure out what other movies inspired it. Whether it's the story, the character development, tone, or even use of music. Every movie was influenced by something that came before, and we want to figure out what. Check out Piecing It Together on your favorite podcast app or check us out on piecingpod.com. You can also follow us on social media at piecingpod. Piecing It Together is a part of the All Points West podcast network.
Hi, this is James Shokum, host of Webcomics Reviews and Interviews. Today we're with Eben Matthews and Adam Martin, co-founders of the Macroverse. So sit back, relax, and let the Geek Fest begin.
Woohoo!
Hello!
Hello! Awesome. Well, yes, thank you for having us on the show. We're excited to chat with you about what we're up to and then even more so about wherever else this may take us.
Yes.
Explain a little bit about Macroverse.
Awesome. So Macroverse is a new digital comics platform. We are digital only, so we're trying to kind of reinvent the way that, well, honestly, kind of the way that comics exist in the world. So the nefarious mustache twisting plan is to kind of disrupt the entire comics industry. But at this very moment, we've got a very cool app, and we're doing something that's really cool in a kind of unique way, kind of exploring the way that comic storytelling works if it's delivered in a mobile-first, really, intentionally designed format for digital devices and even more specifically for your phone. Adam, do you want to tag on that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've had a lot of experience creating kind of digital media in various forms over the last few years, and really felt like there was an opportunity to capitalize on kind of both our backgrounds in kind of entertainment and as comics fans, and then as creators in this kind of digital media, new media space, to bring these things together and create something really kind of unique, which is exciting, and which is what we've done.
And just to, there's the book. There's Rodan. Hello. And one last thing on that. So, Adam says capitalize, and yes, there is a financial component to this, but we're also, really very driven by, trying to serve creators, ourselves being kind of the first ones that we built this for. But then looking at sort of the creative landscape, we can talk about it, but we have some experience creating and producing traditional print comics. And we just saw some areas in the industry that we felt like weren't really serving people that were trying to do stuff outside of the mainstream, especially kind of Marvel, DC, and even more so Diamond paradigm. And then we also felt like, looking at the way the media landscape has developed and where it's all going, that, this thing that we all have in our pockets, for better or worse, really has become the center of our universe. And that, while, there have been interesting ways of consuming, comics content, or more specifically kind of web comics content, on your phone, there's never been something that's been really built to take advantage of what that thing does best. And so that's really where we focused our energies, is how do we create a platform for creators that really solves all the problems that they're dealing with in other formats and other places. And part of that is the monetization question, but a lot of it is also just, how do we open up the doors for more creative and interesting opportunities from a storytelling perspective, once you, again, kind of put this device at the center of the universe.
Okay.
So that's kind of how we're approaching it.
Cool. And I guess while we get the one elephant out of the room, how's that different from current apps like Comixology?
Yeah, so the big thing is that, still most of the digital comics readers out there, in our opinion, are doing two things. One is they're very much a DVD of the movie, essentially. So it's the PDF of the print book. And even though, something like guided view on Comixology, can work pretty well, it also has some real shortcomings with, the way that some pages are constructed, or if it's a double page spread, or the way that things are laid out. It's a solution for something that was never designed to work that way. So it's the pan and scan version of, what a movie would have been. back in the day. So that's how we think about, something like Comixology. It's a great resource for people that can't get to a comic store or want to read those particular titles, but it's just not a native experience. It was never custom, those pieces of content, those comics were never meant to be on a phone, especially. So it's, works great on a tablet, I should say, but, never meant to really be on a phone. And so it's just kind of a clunky experience. And then, kind of similarly, if we look at the other side of the comics industry, I think, Webtoons to us is the one that is most relevant to what we're doing. And, I think Webtoons has really got a lot of things figured out. They've got a big audience. They're enabling creators to do some really interesting storytelling. But, we felt like there was an opportunity to do something, again, that wasn't just a repurposing of what comics have always been. So the endless scroll, still feels very much like a traditional comic, versus, our format, which is, for lack of a better way of explaining it, sort of a tap through medium. So every tap of the screen changes what's happening on the screen. So you're able to create a sort of page turn or a surprise, with every tap through the story. And that creates a really different dynamic in the storytelling. You essentially introduce time as an element in the way that stories unfold. So it becomes a much different experience, and we think a much more engaging and sort of richer one as creators and storytellers.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just to piggyback on that, I think it's a much more kind of cinematic experience, because you get to do things like create dialogue in a realistic way that you just simply can't do on a printed page because of the space required to have that dialogue play out. So I think you get this, like Eben was saying, this kind of series of reveals, which is exciting. But so you can land a joke or land a jump scare even, or you can play with the format and the medium in a way that you just can't do with the ways that these other companies are doing it, which is really exciting.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, one of our creators that we're working with, when we first showed him the platform, he said, the thing I love about this is exactly that. It's like he's a comedian, and he's like, I can actually land a joke in this format, whereas in the print, versions of stuff that he's done, you just can't help but kind of take in the whole page. And it's part of what's great about printed comics. It's just a different experience. And so we're, kind of turning it the other way, where it's like, let's really lean into the ability to land that punchline, or to deliver that surprise, or to, do a scare, again, sort of the idea that every moment can have the impact that a page turn can in a traditional book.
Sorry. So when it comes down to how would a creator apply to this platform?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. I mean, we like to position it, or kind of talk about it as the HBO of comics. So we're not trying to be YouTube. We're not a wide open platform for everybody. We're not trying to do Netflix, where we're trying to cover every possible base. We're really focused on this kind of very highly curated, very top quality experience, while also kind of looking a little bit further down the road, where, we certainly want to be as open and available to, top, great content as we possibly can. We don't have a particular focus as far as genre or style or, anything like that. So we're just really interested in very high quality storytelling, and that covers, a lot of ground. So, right now we've got everything on there from, this great little short series called Side Quest, where, it's essentially formatted, where every episode is about 10 to 15, maybe 20 taps. And so it's this very, very short form series about these, little adventurers that are, going off and having, I guess you could say they're trying to have adventures and failing.
Yes.
And then we've got, all the way up to, we've partnered with 12 Gauge Comics, which is responsible for things like The Ride and Plastic and, a bunch of, pretty well-known indie titles that have mostly been released through Image. And so we're bringing some of their material and kind of reimagining and reformatting that for the platform. All the way to, something like Remind, which we absolutely love, which was a huge Kickstarter success, but has this very Miyazaki kind of feel to the art style and the story. And it's just, this incredibly beautiful piece of storytelling and material. And so, that's a very roundabout way of actually answering your question, but largely we are open to talking to creators about, whatever they're interested in bringing to the platform, with the kind of a initial proviso that, we're an open door for conversation, and then we're looking for just a quality bar. So, we'll kind of look at anything and everything, and then just kind of find the stuff that we think, really, kind of hits that mark of being something that, regardless, again, of genre or style, kind of hits that mark of just being something that's really well crafted and kind of knows what it's doing, essentially.
Okay. Yeah, I've been looking at some of the comics, and definitely might as well talk about a couple of them. Boondock Saints is probably the one that caught my eye the most.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So actually, Troy Duffy, who's the writer, director, producer of the Boondock Saints films, he's actually the one that had the parakeet, so you can draw your own conclusions there. But yeah, so I met Troy probably close to a decade ago, and like so many people, found the movie just through word of mouth, loved the movie. At that point, I had a branding and marketing agency that I had started and ran, for a while, and we were doing mostly kind of corporate work, but also at the kind of beginnings of the heyday of the Flash website, with all the bells and whistles and transitions and animation. And so I actually met Troy because my company got hired to build a version of the Boondock Saints website that was that. So it included a lot of video and transitions and, animation between, as you click on something, a bunch of blood splatter would go across the screen, and quotes from Sean and Norm. So I met Troy that way, and then, just kind of instantly upon seeing the movie, thought this should be a comic series. And that was actually what brought me, as a lifelong comics fan, but that brought me back into kind of really looking at how to make comics as a creator. And we partnered with Troy. He was the co-writer on the comic series. We did it as a tie-in to Boondock Saints 2 when that was coming out. And that was a very traditional process. I went out and I found a publisher, and that's how we met 12 Gauge. They were the publisher. And we went through the whole thing of going through Diamond and bookstores, and we did conventions all over the place and signings at Barnes & Noble, and just the whole thing. And what that gave me specifically was sort of an interesting window into, this is essentially an indie project, but it's a well-known brand. There's a ton of fans. We got, kind of incredible amount of attention doing that series. And, just to be frank about it, I mean, we ended up selling about 10,000 copies average per issue, which, it seemed crazy to me at the time, and it seems even crazier to me now that that's considered kind of a hit in the the indie world of comics. That kind of brought me personally to a point of, the iPad was just coming out at that point, and thinking about, what's a different way to do this, that you've got this, fan base of millions of people. Most of them are unfortunately not comics readers. So we're trying to get them through 4 different steps to get them from I like this movie to going into a comic store and buying comics. And so that was a lot of the kind of early thinking around how do we do this a different way, which has ultimately now led to Macroverse. And so, this series is one that we've, still partnered with Troy to, kind of adapt and bring to the Macroverse platform. So it's a completely different experience of that storyline, and now kind of opening the door to the next adventures of the Saints as well, which is something we're talking about, kind of where does it go from there. So yeah, I mean, that's how that was the genesis of all of that. And it's really fun. And one of the things that we love is having the chance to work with the original creators of this material. So it's not him handing us the property and, going like, oh, go make some stuff. Really not the impetus for it. It's really, how do we take this thing and, have it be in canon and true to the thing that people responded to initially, and build on it from there. So there we go. Boondock Saints.
Yay.
Boondock Saints is definitely an interesting one, mainly because you've got that tie between the two brothers, while at the same time they're doing a lot of violence. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that fascinates Troy, and this series really gets into it, is the lineage aspect of it. So much of what he's interested in as a storyteller, especially with where the Saints come into it, is kind of what the history of violence is, so to speak, or like where does this come from. And so a lot of this particular series kind of gets into the backstory with their dad, and it kind of cross cuts the two storylines between kind of some new brothers material and kind of what are they doing kind of in continuity of the films but outside of what we've seen in the films, and then really getting into how did Il Duce become Il Duce, and how are those two things tied together. If you're a fan of the movies, they didn't really have him around much when they were growing up, so it's that same kind of nature versus nurture theme going on there, which is kind of interesting. So, yeah.
Okay, and for a tonal shift, how about explain a little bit about Glitch?
Yeah, so Glitch is one of my favorite things that we found. So both Adam and I, as we were getting this off the ground, one of the things that we did is just, we wanted to find interesting, cool material. And so we ended up, kind of poking around, and Glitch was one that came from literally, I saw something on Facebook from these two creators, these two women who are making this series. They hadn't started making it yet, but they had started posting some kind of concept sketches. And so I reached out to them, and we, had a couple conversations, and through those conversations, they decided that having it, be kind of Macroverse exclusive and really building it for our format was what they wanted to do. And so, we've helped them, do that through that process. And so it's a great example of, I think, the kind of thing that we do really resonate with, which is here are some really passionate creators who are trying to do something interesting and unique. For those people, who may or may not be familiar with the kind of emerging solar punk genre, that's an area that they're playing in. So, the idea being kind of if you take all the tropes of sci-fi, but kind of make them oriented around, sustainability and kind of the solutions that are not necessarily steampunky, but rather derived from clean energy or, those sorts of things. That's one of the areas that they're playing in. But then they're also, what I loved about their initial pitch was, it's kind of a YA Mad Max world mashup with, this kind of solar punk idea with, kind of a very, interesting perspective on, gender and different types of characters that exist in this world. And, so I think all that they're kind of playing on a bunch of different levels, and we just absolutely love it. Like, we couldn't be more thrilled to have them be one of our exclusive titles and just, really be trying to push the boundaries of themselves as storytellers. And it's also their very first comic project. So it's very fun for us to kind of be able to help and support that, through that process. Yeah.
Okay, and one more just to basically show definite range here. And a little bit more about Remind.
Yeah, so Remind, another great story. So this is Jason Brubaker is the writer and creator and artist of Remind. So he's a one-man powerhouse band. But Jason was a storyboard artist for about 10 years in film and television. But always wanted to make comics. So he's, one of those guys who, always wanted to do it, never did it, but was kind of adjacent to it. And then he, just one day essentially decided, like, I'm going to do this thing finally. And so he packed up his family and moved to Idaho and went full time making comics. And Remind was his first kind of full on comics project. He did it all through Kickstarter, and that was actually how we found him, was again sort of looking at what are the kind of super interesting, incredible indie projects that are out there that have not necessarily reached the audience that we thought they should reach. So again, we had, reached out to him, had a conversation with him, and, agreed to bring not only Remind, but actually he's got two other series that we're in the process of bringing over to Macroverse as well. And we just love his style. So, his art is incredible. His story is incredible. Again, it has this sort of, Miyazaki-esque, feeling to it. And Remind is a story about, basically a cat that gets lost and then gets returned to its owner only to find out that it's been body switched through brain transplantation with a whole different species of lizard men and sort of underwater kingdom, and there's politics and intrigue and magic and technology, and it's kind of incredible mashup of elements. But it's one of our favorite things, and again, just so happy and kind of proud to have been able to bring it into this new format and have it be one of our launch titles. We love it. We love all of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So just out of curiosity, is there basically how hard would it be to transfer a written normal product? Basically, if I were to take a regular comic book and try to translate it over to the Macroverse style, how hard would it be?
It absolutely varies. Adam, do you want to talk about the production process a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's kind of a mechanical element to it, which is simply taking a page and breaking it down into its component panels, literally, and then and obviously then transcribing the dialogue and captions, whatever else too. But then there's the kind of mechanical element that's cutting that up in Photoshop pretty much and going from there. But then there's also transferring that so that the images that work on a page kind of work on the the vertical format on people's phones. That's where you get to kind of bring I think directorial. We both have backgrounds in the entertainment industry, and so you are bringing this kind of directorial sensibility to the reformatting of the printed page so that it works on the phone. So you are choosing, what is the dialogue, how much goes on any one panel, how do the panels interact so that you're telling the story, so that you're both serving the art and making sure that people can enjoy this kind of gorgeous material that goes up, that is kind of part of the original work and goes up on the phone. And then how are you effectively telling the story with this tap through process? How are you moving through the story? How are you, landing the emotional beats, landing the comedy, landing the action? So it's this interesting hybrid of kind of graphic design and artistic sensibility with a kind of with a cinematic, and a kind of directorial approach. It's very cool. It's interesting. It's neither one. Anything to add, Eben? What do you think? It's kind of neither one nor the other. It's got feet in both worlds.
Yeah, and that is so creatively. That's what we love about it. Is like even if this material has existed in print, or I'd say 80% of what we currently have on the platform, has existed in some other format, and so we're creating this sort of adaptation, or we like to call it kind of creator's cut, version of the material. I think what will surprise people is even if you're familiar with it in print, it's an entirely different experience, reading it in this format and reading on your phone. And so that's what we actually try to encourage the most is, kind of rethinking, reimagining the way that the story works, because it is fundamentally a different approach to the material. So even using the same assets, the same art, the same text, we're rethinking how does this sequence work? How does this sequence play out over a series of taps? So through the element of time, through the element of, pacing and surprise, how does this story work and function? And it just creates this really different experience of the material. So that's sort of a creative process component of it. And then to answer the kind of specific question, how do we do that with creators? We really do it in two ways. So we've got a handful of creators that we're working with where, we've said, we love this, we'd love to bring it to the platform. And they'll say, great, I'd love to bring it to the platform. I have no time to do it because I'm working on X, Y, and Z. And we say, great, we can help with that. So they'll deliver essentially all of their, high-res files and scripts and kind of give us all the pieces. And then our team will put it together and work to, bring it into the format, with our goal being that the person reading it on Macroverse cannot tell that it was in print first. Like we want we want everything up there to feel as if it really was custom designed for the phone, for the platform. So that's our intention, and our goal is that it feel completely native. But we've got other creators who go, I love this. I see the way this is working, and I really want to experiment with, pushing the boundaries here. I want to try something different. I want to explore, even my existing material in a different way. Sometimes that includes adding a little bit of additional art, or, changing the way the dialogue works, or, I always wanted this character to say this in this panel, but I didn't have space. So, sometimes it really is a kind of creator's cut, a director's cut, or a variation on the material as we work with the creators to do that. So we've created a whole methodology around it. We've got, tutorials that we share with people. We, literally work with them through the process. Either way. So, again, either they hand it off to us, or we, work with them for them to go through that process themselves. And then it kind of goes through that production cycle and gets to the point where everybody's happy with it. And then we literally have software that pulls it up into our content management system, and then it gets delivered to the app that way. So it is the combination of sort of mechanical production and a real kind of rethinking around the creative storytelling process that we think is sort of the magic of this approach and this format.
As it stands right now, can you add any other artistic elements like, say, sound or motion to the pictures?
That's a great question, and I'm actually really glad you asked it. So we have the technical ability to do anything. I mean, basically, we could do a whole animated series, or we could, add all kinds of bells and whistles. We spent a long time getting to this point, and a lot of that was behind the scenes experimentation. And a lot of our early background actually was in, we were one of the pioneers in the whole motion comics thing years ago, and done a ton of video game work doing cinematics, kind of in that style. And so our early versions of what would become Macroverse, did have a lot of animated elements in it, or multiplane effects, or, adding those sorts of things. And actually a lot of that early stuff looks a lot like what Madefire has ended up doing, with, a lot of transitions and, kind of, again, adding a lot of additional media elements. And where we came to was that ultimately we took all of it out, and we did it very intentionally. So we think that actually, in a weird way, less is more. The desire to add all that stuff is really understandable, and we did a lot. we went down that path ourselves. And I think, a lot of what Madefire has done is really interesting and really cool. And I don't want this to come across as us bashing them in any way, but I think our own experience and from talking to other creators, there are two kind of challenges there. One is that the more bells and whistles you add, the harder it is, at least in most of our experience, to actually really be engaged in and just engulfed in the story itself. So if I've got to wait, every time I tap something or swipe something for animated transition to happen, or for a sound to play, it ultimately to us feels like it gets in the way of the storytelling as opposed to being additive. It's like super cool for a few seconds, and then, I just want to read this. I just want to be in it. And then secondly, from a creator standpoint, we felt really, really, strongly that we need to give creators a way to use the tools that they already know how to use. And while there be a small subsection of people that get really excited about being able to add those other media elements, we didn't want anyone to need to go and learn how to do After Effects, or, how to, we didn't need you to create keyframe animations, or, figure out what soundtrack to use, just to be able to bring something into this new medium. And so I think we're hesitant. We think there's a place for some of that stuff down the road, but we want to just make sure we're really nailing what we kind of consider the core experience, both for readers and for creators, before we, really start adding to the formula, so to speak. So that's our, pretty strong opinion about it. And then at the same time, one thing that we are really interested in is not necessarily adding other media into the episodes themselves, but giving creators a chance to bring other types of storytelling into the mix. And so, for ourselves, we write and create a series on here called Dead Town, And then we've also done things like, gone off and done a series for Deadtown on an app called Yarn, which is a chat fiction app, which is a whole other, media platform. And then been able to kind of tie those two things together. So if you're reading on Deadtown, there's a link that can take you on Macroverse, there's a link that can take you to that series. If you're reading it on Yarn, it's a totally different experience, but there's a link that can bring you to Macroverse. And so, part of what we're really interested in kind of longer term or bigger picture is how we can use all these different types of media that, we have easy access, again, kind of using the phone as the center point or as the hub, to be able to connect the dots between different types of storytelling and creative expression, and kind of, again, enable creators to build bigger worlds, bigger franchises, bigger experiences, without necessarily changing the fundamentals of what we think comics are. So that is a long-winded answer, but there you go. Yes, good. Well, then I'm right on point.
Yeah, I was looking at stuff. Some people would like to add like soundtracks or special sound effects, that sort of things.
Yeah, no, it's something we remain, interested in, and again, sort of, I think there is a place for some of that. We're largely letting the creators kind of drive a lot of that conversation, and it's a funny way of thinking about it for some people, but we actually, we love the readership that we have. Obviously, we couldn't exist without people that actually want to consume this content. But for us, as the creators of the platform and the ones that are sort of building this thing out, we actually kind of really think of the creators as our customers. They're the ones that, we feel like we've got to really serve, both now and in the future. And part of that is giving them, sort of a new way to reach an audience. Part of that is giving them a new way to make money from this stuff. And trying to provide as many opportunities. So I think, as more creators come on board that, say, hey, I really want to add sound effects to this stuff, that would probably be the thing that would drive us more in that direction. But we just want to be, we really, for that sort of thing, like we really want to kind of go slow and carefully and make sure that it really feels like it's, integral to the experience and not just something that's been bolted on. And I think that's probably the main kind of line that we're walking with all of this is just, trying to craft something that it really just feels like it was meant to be that way from start to finish. And, that will evolve.
All right, just on the grounds, it's one of my personal gripes. Is there a reason you guys aren't on the Amazon thing?
on the Amazon, on what specifically?
What do you mean?
Basically, I'm a Kindle user.
Oh,
One
gotcha.
of the things that aggravates me is that I see a lot of the stuff going to the Apple site and the Google site, but never the Amazon site.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the reason is twofold, and it kind of sucks. But one is just from a development resource point of view. Just very, very honestly, it's like the way we build the app. It's very easy to have it be, have it go iOS and Google. Amazon hasn't really created the same kind of tool set for bringing third-party stuff to their platform. So it's an entirely different production process, and sadly, from just a resources standpoint, it's not one that we've been able to justify supporting quite yet. But who knows? I mean, hopefully there will be a way to bring it to more places over time. We would honestly love to kind of ultimately explore what is this? How does this work on a kind of Apple TV format or Kindle Fire format? I think some of that stuff does get really interesting to think about. But yes, that's the sad, unfortunate reason why.
And just the listeners, just because I'm a nice guy, the tech note for the night is that you can download it. The tech note for the night is that you can download the Google APK and install it onto the Kindle, which will take care of that problem.
Ah, very cool.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there you go.
So, just pointing out that it's just sort of one of those things that sort of annoys me a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it would in a perfect world, Amazon would, support the same kind of SDK so that, if you're building for iOS and Google, it would just be another component of the build to put it up on there. But at this point, they don't do that. So I'm glad you have a workaround. That's good for us to know as well.
Yep. Yeah, I was just sort of curious because the Kindle Fire, the Fire OS is a variation of Android. So I'm just curious why.
Yeah, no, it is. It is a variation of Android. My understanding, and I am not a developer, but this is what I understand from our developers, is that it uses Android as the underpinnings, but it's also locked off in a way where you can't just take the same package and get it up there on their store in the same way, or at least they don't have the same accessibility that both iOS and Google Play does at this point. Unfortunately. So if Jeff Bezos, we know you're listening. Can you give us that? We'll put it up.
And I hate going the business route, but what kind of split is there between Macroverse and the creators when it comes to actually putting out the product?
Yeah, no, I love that you've gone the
great
business route, because it's one of the things that we're the most proud of. So, Adam, why don't you? I've been talking a lot. Let me give the British guy a chance here.
No, it's all good. No, it's great. It's fun that you get to trade off these things. But no, we're very much approaching it as a kind of 50-50 split between Macroverse and the creators. So, if you're a creator and you bring something to the platform, we're basically formulating our payment system around it's the kind of Spotify model. So where we have a pool, a creator pool of the revenue that comes in, which is essentially split 50-50 with the company. And then that pool is divided up amongst all the different creators simply based on how many taps, how many interactions, how many readers you have for any one of your projects. So, if there's 1 million taps, 1 million kind of page views on the app in a month, and your series is accounted for 200,000 of those, then you get 20% of the creative pool for that month. And we feel like that was the kind of fairest way that we could think of to, obviously we need to keep the doors open and we need to keep building the company, but also then really reward people for putting their work up on the app and for doing this kind of experimenting in this cool new space. Trying to be as egalitarian about it as possible.
Yeah, it's also, it's one of the things that we heard over and over from creators and experienced ourselves in different, working with different companies, especially in the new media space. We're supposed to have access to all this data, and we do, but in most cases, this is an area that we wanted to really differentiate ourselves. Most of those companies are really kind of stingy with that information, and you can sort of understand why they think they need to be. But it's one of the things we heard from a bunch of other, let's say, mobile-oriented comics platforms. So I can see that I've got, hundreds of thousands of readers, but I actually have no idea what that means as far as what the value of that is. And so, I've done all this hard work to put my thing up, but, I don't understand, or I don't have access to understanding, are they making money from this, but I'm not? Am I getting paid a certain amount, but it's actually worth 10 times that amount? Like, it's very murky. And so we wanted to, really create a system that created a lot of transparency around the information that we have and sharing that with creators, because it's actionable information. I mean, we live in a time where more and more people are making things, whether it's a YouTube channel or a podcast or, building stuff on the web in comics or bringing it to us for Macroverse. I mean, we just live in this world where the boundaries to making things are, becoming smaller and smaller and thinner, and we can go out and make stuff one way or another. But then when we do that, it's very hard to quantify, like, how do you monetize this? How do I keep doing it, essentially? And there are solutions like Patreon out there, but I think, direct information from the places that these things live is really important. And it's the thing that, again, we built this initially for us as creators, and then wanted to kind of bring a broader group to it. So, if we were making something on here, we want to know, like, what is not only what's the readership, but what's the value of that readership, and am I getting compensated fairly for the work that I put in? And then even on the back end of that, this month, let's say my series accounted for 5% of that creator pool. What can I do to make it account for 10% next month? Mm-hmm. So, can I go do more social media marketing, or can I engage with people more, at conventions, or, whatever I'm already doing? It's like you have actionable information, things that you can actually do to increase the revenue that you're making as a creator. So, we felt like that was really important, and we felt like going this, kind of Spotify model, a bit unique in this space, but it really gives people a way to, I think, at least as we've heard from our current creator pool, it gives people a way to feel like I can not only see what's happening, but I'm, being compensated appropriately and fairly. And then what we're a relatively new platform, so we don't have a ton of data on this yet, but our theory and our belief is that, as new things hit the platform, all ships kind of rise together. So, because we're not just giving you a percentage of the subscribers that particularly came in through your series, for example, which is, something we've seen on other, not comics, but other mobile platforms. Instead, you're getting a cut of all the revenue, because a lot of times what will happen is, let's say we do a new Boondock Saints series and a bunch of people come subscribe to read that series. Well, then they go read something else. So, your content kept them reading, it kept them engaged. So, again, there's a value to that we want to reward across the board. So we think all ships kind of rise together in this system. And again, sort of allows people to be fairly and transparently compensated for the work that we're doing. So it is an area I'm glad you brought up, and it's something we feel, really passionate
proud of.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always sort of interesting to explore that, just because of the various models that have been presented throughout the years.
Yeah.
So. Mm-hmm. And of course, the question is, can the person actually translate this to an actual printed version or another platform if they wanted to, or are they stuck on just on Macroverse?
Yeah, so we're very loosey-goosey around that right now. So now's a great time for creators to jump on board, because we are a new platform. So, the way our deals with creators work right now is really just a very simple licensing agreement. So essentially, the version of the material that goes onto Macroverse is exclusive to the platform. And that simply means, we're going to do some work together, either by us doing it or working with the creator, to again sort of make it feel native and custom to this format. So that particular version, that particular expression of the story, we do ask for exclusivity around. But beyond that, do anything. Like if you want to, put it on Comixology, great. If you want to do printed versions, great. Mm-hmm. We're 100% fine with that. And we honestly think, the different ways of reaching different segments of the audience is something that more people should take advantage of. And in a lot of ways we try to help facilitate. So, yes, the answer is yes.
Anything else you guys want to add? We're pretty much close.
Okay. I think the final thing I would say around all of this is, we ultimately kind of want to be the home, we want to be the home for people that, really want to explore the opportunities and the possibilities around storytelling in general. So, comics being the way that we're kind of finding our way into that world with a lot of people, but we're very much thinking about, how to help creators find audiences around different types of media. We're trying to create opportunities for people to, explore and push, kind of their own creative limits in the best possible ways. And we're also very interested in hey, I've got this dream thing that I've been trying to get off the ground for a long time and haven't really found the right home for it. We like to hear about that kind of stuff. Hey, there's this really cool thing that a lot of, actually, I'd say a decent chunk of the material that we have, as we said, is adaptation, but it never really found the audience that, we felt like it should have found, or that the creator felt like it should have found. And that's largely because it's, not come out through traditional channels, or it got overwhelmed in the sea of Marvel, DC, Walking Dead, comic stores. So, we live in this world now where the audience is out there, and we can give them a much more accessible way to get a hold of that material. So, if you're a creator listening and you've got one of those kinds of things, we definitely do want to hear from you. And if you're a reader listening, we'd love for you to check out the app. So just to get into the nuts and bolts of what that is a little bit, you can download Macroverse on iOS or Android. It's available right now. And at least the first episode, in most cases, the first 2 to 3 episodes of every series are free to read. And then if you like a series and you want to keep reading it, then it's a $4.99 monthly subscription for access to everything. So basically the cost of one printed comic to have access to everything on the app all the time forever. And we're adding new stuff all the time. So right now we've got a minimum of 2 episodes per month. A minimum of 2 episodes per week going up, and then also launching new series at least every month. So we've got a bunch of new stuff coming up. We've got a ton of stuff in production right now. So over the course of this year, we're going to be adding more and more and more material kind of fast and furiously. And then as a very quick plug, just because it's coming up, the next new series to launch on Macroverse will come out not this week, but next week. And that is an incredible series called Hex 11, which is another kind of darling indie property that is just absolutely beautiful. The illustration work is incredible. The story is incredibly cool. And the quick pitch on it is, what if magic was discovered as a new technology? And so it's, this idea of what if you could download mystical and magical abilities, and what does the world look like as that starts to create a ecosystem and divides and kind of all the complications that disruptive new technologies bring to the world. So it's a really interesting, really cool series, lots of fun characters, and that will be again out next week. So lots of fun to be had all the way around. We also really love feedback from people. So, we're at a point right now where the more reader feedback we get, the happier we are, good, bad, or ugly. It's very important to us that we're crafting something that, really that people are enjoying. So if you see the app and you're like, oh, this is really cool, but I wish it did this or this, including sound effects, we're very happy to hear that. And you can find us and more of us all over social media at Macroverse or at Macroverse Media. And we're also on the web at macroverse.media or www.macroverse.media. So we're super excited about everything we're doing. We love to hear and talk to more creators who, respond to it, hear from readers who are enjoying it or not enjoying it, and find out why. And we're just, we're in kind of full out building, creating, startup everything mode at the moment, and just want to spread the word. So there it is. Let's have the word. Excuse me, Adam. Anything you want to add at the end there?
Yeah, no, I think it just like you say, everything was saying what you were saying. We're in kind of growth mode, and just want to talk to both creators and fans, and keep doing something kind of unique and cool in this space. So yeah,
absolutely. It's just the beginning.
All right, cool. And that basically should be a wrap, guys. Thanks.
Awesome.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Awesome.
So, and that was, here's where I normally get the names wrong. And that was Eben Matthews and Adam Martin of the Macroverse.
Yes. The big one. The big universe. Macroverse. Yeah.
For those interested in supporting this podcast, please check us out over at patreon.com/twosparrows. We have mini-casts, a few extra tips and tricks here and there, an edited version of interviews that include all the swearing as well as a little bit longer, as well as an actual episode of this podcast that has yet to be aired anywhere else. Also check us out over at YouTube, where we have curated playlists where all the various podcasts have been broken down into various different types of sections, such as world building, business, marketing, writing, etc., as well as additional mini-casts, as well as the Alexa briefs. And definitely check us out over on Facebook. This allows you not only to comment on the various videos, but also catch up on a few other things as well.